I warned you. I told you not to interfere. I told you not to try to protect him. You should have listened." Karen had finally revealed just how far she was willing to go. She had finally shown everyone exactly how cold and calculated she could be. I always assumed there was a ceiling to her behavior: the constant surveillance, the slow walks with a clipboard, the smug little reminders wrapped in fake concern. I convinced myself that even someone like her had a line she wouldn't cross. I couldn't have been more wrong. That truth hit me well before the real harm even began. Welcome Tummy Channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe for premium HOA Chaos. It all began the week my cousin came to stay with me. Toby flew in for a brief break, looking forward to unwinding, eating decent meals, and laughing a little too loudly without someone threatening fines. He was dark-skinned, quick with humor, unfailingly respectful, and the type of guest who cleaned up after himself without needing reminders. On the very first morning of his visit, Karen showed up near my driveway, pretending to examine irrigation lines that didn't belong to her. That same afternoon, she knocked on my door, wearing a stiff smile, claiming she'd seen a suspicious person around my home. When she described him, I calmly explained that it was my cousin visiting. Her expression stiffened, fractured for just a second, then reset. She nodded, said it was no issue, and left far too fast. From that point on, everything changed. Karen started tracking our comings and goings. She waved at me like always, but stared at Toby as if he were a puzzle she resented having to look at. Whenever he sat outside, she'd slowly drive past the house. Once, twice, sometimes more. One afternoon, she asked where he worked, how long he planned to stay, and whether he had authorization to live there. I answered calmly, but her pen dug harsh lines into her clipboard. Before we continue, tell us in the comments what country or city you're watching from. We're always curious how far these stories reach. A few days later, Karen called again. Her voice was sweet, but there was an edge beneath it. She asked why my so-called cousin was still around. I paused, then asked her to clarify. She claimed she was just checking, sure the situation was temporary. I told her he was visiting, not moving in, and that his travel plans were none of her business. She gave a short, hollow laugh, and said, "People like him often overstayed their welcome." That single sentence told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, she cornered me by the community mailboxes. She said there wasn't an official issue yet, but that some residents felt uncomfortable. She blamed declining property values, security concerns, and community standards. I reminded her that guests were permitted under the HOA guidelines. She dismissed that and said rules could always be revisited. Then she walked away smiling, as she'd already secured a victory. At the next HOA meeting, Karen dominated the discussion longer than usual. She spoke about non-residents draining amenities, using services they didn't pay for, and creating potential threats. She never mentioned Toby by name, but every word was clearly aimed at him. People nodded along, papers rustled, and not one person spoke up. I sat there in disbelief as she proposed stricter guest regulations, framed as a temporary solution. 2 days later, the fallout began. When Toby tried to enter the gym, the staff stopped him. Guest access had suddenly changed. When I walked in with him, they said guests were no longer allowed during peak hours. Peak hours now stretched across nearly the entire day. At the pool, his wristband was questioned. At the lounge, he was turned away. Every new restriction seemed to exist only when he was present. I confronted Karen face to face. She denied everything, insisted the policies weren't personal, then warned me that continuing to challenge her could cause things to escalate. That word stayed with me: escalate. She wasn't trying to resolve anything. She was preparing for something much worse. She was testing boundaries, gauging reactions, and clearly relishing the imbalance. That's when I realized she wasn't just enforcing rules, she was wielding them like weapons. And she hadn't even come close to finishing. One quiet afternoon, when the house finally felt still again, everything erupted. Toby had gone to the bathroom for a shower, humming off-key, as he always did when he thought no one was listening. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup, when a piercing scream cut through the air. It wasn't staged or exaggerated, it was raw, panicked, and it froze my blood instantly. I sprinted down the hall and burst into the bathroom. Water spread across the floor. Toby lay on the tiles, twisted painfully, one arm pinned beneath him. His face was pale, teeth clenched, breath shallow and uneven. I knelt beside him, heart hammering, asking if he could move. He tried, winced, and shook his head. I grabbed my phone and called 911, words tumbling out as I tried to keep him still. The ambulance arrived swiftly, lights flashing, paramedics stepping in with calm, professional efficiency that cut through my panic. They moved methodically, checking vitals, asking questions, stabilizing him. Toby managed a weak joke about his luck, trying to mask the fear. I was just starting to breathe again when a familiar, unwelcome voice sliced through the room. Karen stormed in as if the hallway belonged to her. She demanded they stop immediately. One paramedic, confused, asked what the issue was. Karen pointed at Toby and said he wasn't a resident, didn't pay HOA fees, and had no right to community services. The paramedic blinked, then calmly explained that emergency care wasn't contingent on HOA membership. Karen's voice rose, insisting that rules were rules. She claimed letting them continue would set a dangerous precedent and warned of consequences if her authority was ignored. The paramedics ignored her and continued, applying pressure, checking for fractures, calmly explaining that any delay could cause severe harm. Karen's voice grew louder, pacing, jabbing a finger toward Toby as if he were a violation notice rather than a human being. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering, recording on their phones. Karen seemed energized by the attention, repeating over and over that she had warned everyone. When the paramedics announced they needed to transport him for further tests, Karen scoffed, claiming it was unnecessary. I stood frozen, fear and anger colliding, realizing this had gone far beyond harassment. This wasn't about rules anymore, it was about domination. And Karen was unraveling fast. As the stretcher moved toward the driveway, Karen vanished for a heartbeat and reappeared with intent. She yanked open her car door, reached inside, and emerged, gripping a metal bat, as if rehearsing this exact moment. Shouts rang out, someone yelled her name, someone shouted to stop, but Karen didn't hesitate. She charged. The first swing struck a paramedic's head with a sickening metallic crack that silenced the street. The second slammed into her shoulder as she crumpled, but the chaos had already begun. Silence detonated into chaos. Neighbors screamed. Phones shot up to capture the scene. The bat skidded across the pavement and slipped from Karen's hands. I dropped beside the injured paramedic, checking for signs of life, calling her name, feeling my pulse hammering in my ears. She was barely breathing. I turned to see Karen pacing, chest heaving, still ranting about rules, still claiming authority, still insisting she'd warned everyone. Her eyes were wild, untethered, as if consequences didn't exist in her world. I called the police. My voice was steady. The other paramedic worked frantically, radioing for backup and refusing to abandon their partner. Someone kicked the bat farther away. Karen stammered, trying to rationalize her actions, blaming policies, me, the world. Sirens arrived moments later. Officers ran in, weapons lowered, but ready, commands sharp and clear. Karen attempted to walk off, but she was stopped, handcuffed, and led to a cruiser while screaming about lawsuits and power. Body cameras captured everything: the bat, the strikes, the fall, and the witnesses finally speaking in unison. The injured paramedic survived after emergency surgery. Karen didn't recover socially, legally, or morally. She was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced her to 6 years in state prison, citing a total lack of remorse, and ordered her to pay $485,000 in restitution for medical costs, lost wages, and trauma damages. The HOA permanently removed her and dissolved the committee she had dominated. When she was taken away, the neighborhood didn't cheer. It exhaled. Accountability had finally arrived, loud, undeniable, and inescapable. The end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more HOA showdowns. Tell us in the comments, do you think she got what she deserved?